Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Z. I am a clinical psychologist specializing in transgender care. Welcome to my channel. If you are new or regular viewer who has not yet subscribed to this channel, please make sure you do subscribe. That way, you're not only helping to support me, but you're also helping so many other fellow people find this valuable and free content. And if you don't yet follow me on Instagram, link is below. Make sure you also follow me on Instagram. That's where I show up for all of you to share tips, advice, guidance, and I also do weekly Q&A. So please go ahead and follow me. I would love to connect with all of you. For today's video, we're going to be discussing three major factors that tend to influence a relapse in imposter syndrome when it comes to gender identity. Let's start off by discussing what is imposter syndrome as it relates to gender identity. Imposter syndrome is going to be something that is going to be highly familiar to a lot of you. A lot of you may have already experienced imposter syndrome. A lot of you may already know exactly what it feels like. Simply put, imposter syndrome is when a part of you feels like you don't belong, feels like you are faking it, and feels like you are pretending to be particular gender. It oftentimes happens when you start gender transition, midway through gender transition, or post-gender transition, as we will be discussing today. It is a period of a time when you are stepping into your authentic self, and instead of feeling confident and secure, you feel like you're faking it. You feel like you're pretending. You feel like you are fooling people around you. Imposter syndrome is incredibly common. I have yet to work with a person that has not, at least at some point in their journey, experienced imposter syndrome. It is that common. On top of that, imposter syndrome, in my experience, tend to really drastically increase, specifically when you also get to that point where misgendering ceases to exist. When, in other words, when you do pass, if passing is for you. So when you are socially being perceived and seen as your authentic self, that's interestingly tends to be the time period when imposter syndrome tends to shoot through the roof. And one of the reasons for that is because now that you are being truly seen as your authentic self, you yourself have not really caught up internally with who you are. And as a result, you feel like this seems a little bizarre. Why did when I go out there, people truly do see me for who I am? And the longer you live with gender dysphoria, the more of imposter syndrome you're going to experience because you lived that long not being seen for who you are. And now suddenly you are starting to be seen for who you are. And like I said, it's almost like, think about it this way, your body now has caught up where people look at you and the gender you based in your authentic gender, but your internal self, your internal psychological self has yet to do catching up. And so as a result, it feels a little strange for you and it may, not may, but actually does, in fact, starts up and spikes up imposter syndrome in a lot of you. So that's imposter syndrome. Another way to look at imposter syndrome that people tend to tell me is it feels as if you are trespassing on a territory where you don't belong. Imposter syndrome, one of the things to know about imposter syndrome, it's not really a mental illness. It's not really necessarily that anything is wrong with you. It is a normal psychological phenomenon that all of us experiences. You just happen to experience it in regard to your gender identity. But people always and continue to experience imposter syndrome in regard to a lot of other things in their life, in regard to their careers. For example, the amazing, famous Maya Angelou has always said that she felt imposter syndrome every time she published a book, thinking that people are just going to come after her, saying that you are, in fact, not as great of an author as you seem to be. So imposter syndrome, again, is a very, very common phenomenon among just among everybody else. In your case, again, it just so happens to be in regards to gender identity. Now, one of the things you need to also understand about imposter syndrome is that it's not necessarily something that you cure. It's not necessarily something that you get completely rid of. What often happens is that imposter syndrome either kind of stifles to exist because you gain that confidence. You now fully embrace and own yourself. And you also have the sense of value, sense of inner worth, your self-esteem goes up. And as a result, imposter syndrome vanishes. But imposter syndrome is not necessarily like a straight line of getting rid of it. It tends to, just like dysphoria, it tends to unfortunately bubble up in different periods of our lives. And that's how imposter syndrome relapse happens. What they mean by relapse? A lot of times people feel like they have dealt with imposter syndrome. They feel like they have gone through that period of time, feeling that insecurity, and now feel like they're owning who they are. Oftentimes this happens post-transition, and then suddenly they find themselves, wait a second, I've been confident for 2, 3 years, and now suddenly I feel this imposter feelings coming up again. What is happening? That's what imposter syndrome relapse is. Again, think about the word relapse, something that ceased to be and now it's coming up again to the surface. And there are oftentimes three most common patterns, three most common reasons why imposter syndrome may surface again. And I want to share them with all of you because if you feel like imposter syndrome has resurfaced again, then do consider whether any of these three factors have took place. Knowing and understanding these factors can help you normalize that this is normal and natural to experience resurfacing of imposter syndrome. So the first sign that tends to be a factor in causing the imposter syndrome relapse, imposter syndrome to resurface, is external changes to your environment. These are external things that are beyond your control. For example, suddenly experiencing any form of discrimination in your life after not experiencing any for a long time can and does undoubtedly spikes up imposter syndrome feelings. Another common one is transphobic politics, especially right now as I am recording this in September 2024, before November elections. Especially right now, we all know and we all understand that unfortunately trans folks are being utilized and weaponized as political pawn, and as a result there's a lot of transphobic political rhetoric out there. When you're being exposed to that, it is going to increase your imposter feelings. Why? Because when you're exposed to things like that tend to dehumanize you, that tend to convey to you that you don't belong, you're going to start suddenly feeling those things again, as if you are trespassing, as if you don't belong, as if you are faking or pretending to be something that you are not. And this might happen to you even if you've been living post-transition for many, many years. Suddenly, because the political climate changes and your rights are at stake as a human being, your dignity and your freedoms are at stake as human beings, imposter syndrome is going to bubble up to the surface. So if you're experiencing the increase, especially now, keep in mind that's because of this external factors. So external changes the environment. If you're experiencing sudden and quick changes to environment, discrimination, any kind of external transphobia, either at work or anywhere else, exposure to transphobic politics, those things do increase and lead to imposter relapse. The second, I'm jumping ahead of myself. The second factor that tends to lead to imposter relapse, to imposter resurfacing, is life transitions. Life transitions are going to be normal, natural occurrences to so many of you. Usually, big life transitions such as changing jobs, perhaps leaving your hometown, your city, your state, moving to a different country, getting out of relationship into new relationships. So think about bigger life transitions. Again, shifting your work, shifting the environment where you live, your relationships. Oftentimes do lead to imposter resurfacing. One of the primary reasons is because you are now on a new, you're not submerging yourself and exposing yourself to new life experiences. And as a result, you are now navigating these life experiences in your authentic genders that you didn't navigate before. And it might spike up within you those feelings of fakeness, those feelings of, oh, I don't belong. Oh, what if I'm going to get discovered? Think about work, for example. Right now, you may be comfortable within your work environment. You maybe either came out at work and, everybody supports and knows you and cares about you, or maybe you never came out at work and you've been living your lifestyles, whatever is important to you. But one way or another, you may have in the beginning felt uncomfortable at work and with some time became much more comfortable, much more content. in your work environment. But when you do change work environment, whether again you decide to come out at your future job or whether you are going to be leaving styles, you're now realizing you're going to be exposed to the whole new cohort of coworkers and peers. Cohort and coworkers and peers who don't know anything about you. And so for a lot of individuals, that may spike up resurfacing of imposter syndrome because now you're thinking, oh, these people don't know me. What does they know about my past? What does they know about my transgender history? What is they knew about my gender identity? All of these things spike up imposter syndrome. Part of this kind of feeling of, these people don't know my past is a trauma response, believe it or not. It is a trauma response to living in a world where you constantly have to either hide your transgender history or you have to be very cautious about how you share your transgender history. And that's really unfortunate, but that trauma response is what also is at the core of imposter feelings bubbling up. So any big life transition, again, same thing, moving to a new community, new city, new state, you're being exposed to a new environment, new relationship, new partnership, that are potentially going to lead to imposter syndrome resurfacing and relapsing. And the third one that is also very, very common is any kind of internal shifts you may experience. What do I mean by internal shifts? As an individual throughout your life, you are going to continue to evolve and grow. That means that your own relationship to your gender, that your own relationship to your internal selves is also going to continue to evolve and grow. And believe it or not, the way you feel about your relationship to your gender is going to continue to shift. What I mean by shift is the sense that it's going to shift in a big way, where you're going to maybe feel that, oh, this is really not my gender. That seldom happens. But it's going to shift in a sense of maybe the way you conceptualized and perceived what a woman is and what a feminine identity is going to shift based on your life exposures and experiences. Maybe you're going to see differently, or some of those things that you thought were defining factors of what a woman or man or non-binary person is are suddenly going to change. And when those things change, it is undoubtable that you're also going to change how you perceive yourself. So any of those internal shifts, any of the internal growth may also increase or may lead to imposter relapse or imposter resurfacing. Now, again, with all of these three factors, it may not. But oftentimes, when I have people come back to me post-transition, oftentimes one of the most common individuals who come to work with me post-transition, who seek my support and services, is for imposter syndrome relapse. When people come back and they say, I don't know what happened, I've been living, if passing matters to, I've been living styles for 5-10 years, and I've been feeling really great about myself. And now suddenly for the past year, I feel like my whole confidence has plummeted. I feel like, again, I'm terrified of people discovering who I am. I feel like all of these imposter feelings coming up. What is happening? And oftentimes when we start digging deep and looking at what may have happened, one of these three factors is going to be predominant. Oftentimes, the first factor, the external circumstances that are beyond your control, are by far very, very responsible for imposter syndrome to resurface. The second one, external transitions, I think, not external, but life transitions. Oftentimes, I think we forget that shifting and going through such big life transition is going to undeniably make us feel one way or another about ourselves. It is going to bring some kind of shifts within us, even without gender being a primary core issue. For anybody who is, for example, maybe even getting a job promotion and going to work at a different company, essentially there's going to be some element of anxiety. And for a lot of people, there's essentially in the beginning an element of imposter feelings too. So one of the primary things to recognize when imposter syndrome relapse happens, when it resurfaces, is recognize that, again, this is all natural part. This is all normal part of being human being. Having imposter feelings come to the surface doesn't mean anything bad. What you want to be aware of is that it's happening to you, recognize it, acknowledging it, give name to it, normalize it for yourself, and then work on rebuilding your confidence, stepping back into your confident self, and acknowledging that these feelings are also going to pass. It is only when a person starts really dwelling and ruminating about imposter syndrome feelings and getting into the depths of insecurity within themselves that imposter feelings start to grow bigger and bigger. Remember, if you're going to feed negative thoughts to any negative feelings you have towards yourself, they are going to grow. If you are going to recognize them and allow them to pass on and focus on the positive, you're allowing the positive to flourish and negative to wilt away. Think about your mind as a garden. I always like to use that analogy with my clients. Think about it as a garden, and all of the thoughts, everything that cultivates are things that are growing in your garden. For imposter syndrome, when it resurfaces, when relapse happens, it's akin to having weeds show up in your garden. If you're going to continue hyper focus on weeds and water them and give them the negative energy that it wants to get from you, you're going to grow your weeds bigger. If you're going to ignore them or ideally pull the heck out of them out of your mental garden, they're going to go away. That's what I recommend, but recognize that imposter relapse is common. It does happen. It is natural part of being human being. You may never experience imposter syndrome relapse, but if you do, keep in mind these are the three most common factors why it tends to happen. Comment below, let me know if you experienced imposter syndrome relapse. What were the factors that contributed to you experiencing imposter syndrome? Comment below, love hearing your comments, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye.